Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrea Webster. I work with IU's Environmental Resilience Institute, and I'm so happy to welcome you to today's Prepared for Environmental Change webinar. Today's topic is the economic value of preparedness and resilience. Before we get started, I want to let you know that everyone's muted. Please save your questions till the end, but if you have an urgent or clarifying question, I would encourage you to put that into the chat function, which you can find by hovering your mouse over the Zoom window, and that should make a chat icon appear. We will be live tweeting the webinar from @prepared4change, so we encourage you to engage online and retweet as you desired, either during or after the webinar. And I also want to let you all know that we're recording the webinar as we always do, and I'll share that recording with you in a follow-up email, probably on Friday or Monday of this week. And we would certainly encourage you to share that email and that link of the recording with your colleagues, because we want to share these resources as widely as possible, because there's just so many talented people out there, and we're really happy to share their knowledge with you. So finally, I'm very pleased to introduce the Director of the Environmental Resilience Institute, Janet McCabe, and Janet will be our moderator today. So Janet, I'll pass it to you.
Thanks, Andrea, and hi, everybody. We're so pleased to have you with us today. Thanks for joining our webinar today. I want to start sort of on a serious note by recognizing that the country is in a pretty tough time right now. And in particular, our communities of color are just experiencing extraordinary pressure and strife these days. I want you to know that the ERI supports the Black Lives Matter movement and the protests that have been happening, and that we stand with all Hoosiers in opposition to violence and oppression, and are going to be working hard to figure out what we need to do to play our part in finally and fully trying to address the systemic problems that have plagued our country for years. Just on a personal note, I have to say, and I'm of an age, and I'm getting increasingly angry with the education that I received back in the 60s and 70s, because I feel it failed me in many ways. So we also have a pandemic going on. There's a lot going on in the world, and even more, we appreciate you tuning in today, recognizing that we need to be preparing all of our communities, but especially our communities of color, for climate change. I think in these days when we're stuck at home, or in difficult situations, and a lot seems to be sort of on hold, it is gratifying, personally gratifying, to each of us to be able to actually do something constructive that's positive and moving forward. And doing things like this, I think, fall into that category. Today we have two incredibly talented speakers, William Liao and Jessica Davis, who are going to share their expertise on a really, really important topic, which is how to build and integrate economic arguments into sustainability and resilience projects. Jessica, whom I've known for a number of years now, will talk about how she starts resilience and sustainability initiatives with the economic argument, for why the institution she works for, IUPUI, the Purdue University campus in Indianapolis, why that institution should implement the project. And then William, who I've just met recently, is going to review for us a new online platform for risk, resilience, and expenditures in disasters. It's a really, really interesting tool that takes advantage of significant bodies of data that can be put together in ways that are useful and helpful to practitioners and people out in the real world who are making decisions. So we're super excited about that new tool, and William is excited to hear your feedback on it, either today through your questions or afterwards. Just a reminder, or for those of you who are here for the first time, the Environmental Resilience Institute, which is a project of the Prepared for Environmental Change Grand Challenge at IU, has a number of different resources available, especially focused on helping local governments in Indiana, but also all these resources are available to everybody. These are a couple of them, and we're happy to get you information on any of them that you'd like more information about. We are continuing our webinar series in July. Very timely, our topic will be managing extreme heat. This is a phenomenon that we know is coming. Actually, this week has been a nice little example of how much heat we are having in Indiana. Although I'll notice I've been watching the air quality index, and because there's so much less driving going on, the air quality has actually been pretty good. But it's still been awfully hot. Based on the experiences Andrea and I have had with on this issue, we need to be talking about extreme heat a lot more in Indiana. It's one of these sort of off in the distance things that is not getting to the top of our priority list. We've learned anything from the pandemic, it's that it is important to pay attention to these things, even if they are not right in front of you. So I want to thank our supporters, our sponsors for the webinar series, the Association of Indiana Counties, Accelerate Indiana Municipalities, and also the Indiana Public Health Association and Health by Design, very important organizations. We had over 60 people register for today's webinar from all over the state and perhaps country and perhaps world. I don't know, I didn't read the whole list, but we do get people who join us from all over the place, which is great. So I'm going to quickly give you a little background on our two speakers, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jessica, and you won't hear from me again until the very end. First I'll introduce the second speaker. William is Projects Director and Researcher at the Crisis Technologies Innovation Lab at the Luddy School of Informatics, Computing and Engineering at Indiana University. That is too many words to have in the title of somebody's program. And hard to say. His research interests include data science, but for healthcare and emergency response, so right in our wheelhouse. He completed his BA in telecommunications at IU Bloomington in 2016 and a master's in data science in 2019. Prior to coming to IU, he worked in data science and lean product development for marketing and healthcare companies. And Jessica Davis is the Director of Sustainability at IUPUI and has been employed in the field of sustainability since 2010. As Director of Sustainability at IUPUI, Jessica provides leadership and acts as an organizational strategist for sustainability, collaborating across the campus community to integrate sustainability into curriculum, research, and operations to promote an instinctive culture of sustainability at IUPUI. If you've ever met her, you know that she embodies sustainability and effectiveness. I've seen her in action. She is from Indiana. She has a BS in biology from Marian University, a master's in ecology from the University of Dayton, and an MPA in urban sustainability from IUPUI's O'Neill School of Public and Environmental Affairs, where she also now serves on the faculty. And I'm told that she's been responsible for students deciding to change their majors to sustainability after taking her class. And I'm sure you will all want to do that too after you hear her today. So I'm going to turn it over to Jessica and look forward to hearing both of our presenters today.
Thanks, Janet. I appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And while I'm doing that, fair warning, I do have a dog. His name is Darwin. He will likely butt his head in at many points during this presentation. His biggest skill is actually manipulating me to do whatever he wants to do. So a little bit of background on him. Let's see, share screen here. Andrea, it's saying I don't have access to share screen.
Okay, I know Zoom changed some of its settings, so you should be able to do that now.
Okay, let me try that. Now I'm having to change my preferences on my end too. Sorry.
Oh, that's all right.
Okay, it's still not letting me do it. Do you mind pulling them up on your end? Because I know
Yep.
that's why I sent them to you in advance, right?
Yep, this is why. All right.
Oh, wait, hang on a second. I might be able to do it now. Yes.
Okay.
You see it now? I think it just took a hot second for the settings to go through.
Yep,
Yes.
we've got it.
Okay, awesome, great. First hurdle cleared. We're good now. So yeah, my name is Jessica. I'm the Director of Sustainability at IUPUI, and I'm going to be walking you through some of the processes that we go through in determining how to work on or choose which sustainability projects to adopt. And know that when I talk about sustainability, I'm also including resilience in that. I just will tend to lean on or say sustainability more often than not, just because that's the world in which I tend to exist in. But know that when I hear sustainability, you can hear resilience along with that. So the first thing that I actually want to start with is maybe a bit unexpected, but it's a little bit of a philosophical question on this idea of value. Like the title of this series is The Value of the Economic Preparedness of being prepared or resilient. So first of all, what is value and how do we determine it? Because how we answer these questions actually sets up these future decisions that we make as an organization around questions of sustainability and resilience. So while I go through this, this is not for discussion at this point. If we have time for questions at the end, I would really like to dive into this. But for the time being, I would just like for you all to drop your responses to these questions in the chat. And we'll see kind of how these come through. And hopefully we'll have time at the end to talk about it. So I have two main questions that if you feel comfortable sharing as a representative of your organization, I would really like to know the answers to these. Or even if you don't feel comfortable writing them, at least think about them in your head. So the first question is, what sort of financial model or rule does your organization use or follow to determine when a project moves forward? So an example here in the IU system is that we tend to lean on the 10-year return on investment rule. That's more of like a guiding principle. Sometimes that rule is broken, sometimes that rule is shorter, but that seems to be the rule that we tend to lean on. Especially we're always considering that rule when we're considering sustainability solutions on campus, knowing that this is going to be a guiding principle for the organization. So that's kind of, if you could drop that into the chat. The other one is, does that rule or model adequately address and include the cost of doing nothing, especially when you know future challenges or risks are on their way? And I think this is the one that's actually much more interesting to me, is do these return on investment models, do these financial models really take into account the cost of doing nothing, especially in the face of challenges that we know are coming, right? We know that they're coming. So as you all think about that and drop that in the chat, I'm hopeful we'll be able to discuss this a little bit more in depth later, but just keep those questions, the answers to those questions in mind as we move on. So the first thing that I really want to start with then is, like, let's talk about terms here: price, cost, and value. And some of this is just really basic, like Econ 101, Business 101, but I think it's really important that we understand what words mean when we say them. So price is what we pay, we as individuals, we as our organizations, and it's objective, right? The price is what it is. Sure, you can get quotes across the board, you can get multiple vendors, but the price is what it is, it's objective. Cost is all the inputs that go into creating that particular product or service that then we might procure. That is typically objective as well, right? Some other organization is assigning those input costs into that model. And then the last one is value, and that is the utility or the utilization that we get out of that particular item or service as an individual or an organization. And value is subjective. How much we value things depends on who we are, what we stand for, how much we think the problem is big enough to deal with. There are a lot of questions that can go into determining the value of any decision that we make. So knowing these things and knowing that value is subjective, then this means we have to look at a handful of things organizationally to determine how much value any decision has. So at least in our case, in sustainability at IUPUI, there are a handful of things that we look for and we use as signals to us from the organization, knowing that they will value a decision that we make. Sometimes those values can be found in the mission statement, the vision statement. Some organizations explicitly list their values. Indiana University does, and I'll share those with you here on the next couple of screens, where we lay out what our institutional values are. It might be in your strategic plan, right? So your strategic plan is a way for you to enact your organizational values, right? These are our priorities. And if it's in the strategic plan, that determines how money is spent, how time is spent, where effort is spent. If you look at those things, or if you don't have those things, then it's hard to determine value of something if you don't have guiding principles. So when you think about your own organization, if you have a couple of these, or maybe values aren't explicitly listed, maybe it's a really good time to revisit, rewrite, or even just initially write those. I think especially now we're seeing how exposed we have been to a lot of challenges. And unless, I think it's an appropriate time to really consider writing for the first time or revisiting our institutional values. Like, what do we stand for, and what is going to be the guiding principle for how we decide to spend money? So as I mentioned, Indiana University explicitly lists its core values. So as the Office of Sustainability, we can lean on this document to provide us with guidance. This is one part of our argument for investing in sustainability, is that we can explicitly call out these things and say, hey, our institution stands for this. And if we stand for this, that means that it's worth the investment. And the one that I have highlighted here in blue explicitly calls out sustainability. There are certainly sustainability ideals and values in some of these other ones that are listed in the values of IU, but explicitly sustainability is called out as a value. So that really gives us an initial leg up on any sustainability solution that we're presenting, because it is aligned with the self-stated values of the organization. Another thing that I'll ask, or I'll encourage you to do, is reframing this question around sustainability and resilience. Oftentimes, I've seen it from my own peers and colleagues, we can get in trouble where we say, we can get into finger pointing or finger wagging, and we say, well, why aren't you doing sustainability? Or why aren't you doing resilience to the level that it should be? And that's the question, what can my organization do for sustainability? Right? Why aren't you doing this? That's what that question is. I would encourage us to actually take that question and flip it on its head. The question is really, what can sustainability and resilience do for my organization? And those are two very different questions. They come from two different vantage points. One is the vantage point of you're not doing anything and we're inadequate. And the other one is from the vantage point of sustainability and resilience being an effective tool by which our organization gets better. So just know that these questions are different, and consider how you ask questions around sustainability and resilience. And then just to give you a real high-level overview of how our unit works, we have a sustainability strategic plan for IUPUI. Our office owns that plan, as in it's housed with us, but we do it in conjunction with partners across the campus. And within that plan, we have academic goals, operational goals, and engagement goals that creates the plan itself. However, we go back to that initial idea that our strategic plan as a unit supports the university strategy. It is not a distraction to the strategy. It is aligned with the strategy, and it is an asset to helping the campus fulfill its campus-wide strategy. And it was built that way purposefully. So this means that when we're looking at any sort of effort that we want to potentially pursue on campus, and at any moment, there could be thousands of sustainability solutions we could be pursuing. So how do you prioritize them? How do you assign the highest value, again, knowing that value is subjective, to determine what solution to move forward to? So this is kind of the little recipe book that for our organization, this works for us. And if our team can work together to make sure that our sustainability efforts check as many of these boxes as possible, that means we're going to be much more likely to get a yes. So the recipe book will be different for every organization, right? Because we all have different values. We all stand for different things. But this is what our recipe for success looks like. And the first one on that list is that it has to be an effort by which we can fulfill the strategic plan or support the strategic plan and live the values as stated by Indiana University. If it doesn't do that, then it's immediately a distraction to the university's area of investment, right? So that's the first place we have to start with. If it can engage students, right? Because we're a university, we are here for students. That's why we exist. So that's central to our identity. If it can fulfill an operational need of the campus, right? So we have a lot of opportunities to improve efficiencies in how we work. Is it financially responsible? And financially responsible can mean a lot of different things. It can mean that it's going to save you money, that it be cost neutral, that it might earn you external dollars through grants of foundations. It might have an academic or engagement return, right? Because that's why we exist. We exist to support students. So even though it may be hard to tie a firm dollar amount to student learning and engagement, if it supports that, that is value to the institution. And the last one is if it positions the university as a trailblazer in sustainability, as an innovator. So the more of these boxes that we can check, the more that we know our efforts will be much more likely to go forward and be supported enthusiastically. Of course, there are some things that we do where they only check one thing on this box, but it's a really compelling argument and that's good enough to move it forward. But the more of these boxes we can check, we know the more successful it will be. And again, this is specific to us, right? This is after learning our organization, what it stands for, what our decision makers care about. This is how we were able to develop this little recipe. So just real quick, I just want to do a real quick dispelling of some myths of sustainability and resilience. And the biggest one that I hear is, oh, sustainability and resilience is expensive. So yeah, let's talk about the truth of that. Yes, sustainability and resilience initiatives can be expensive, talking about the hard objective dollar amount on the upfront, but they are far less expensive in the long run. Often because we are anticipating and mitigating risk that is known at this point. Sustainability and resilience efforts don't all have an easily measurable return on investment. And it's mainly because of this thing called externalities, right? Where there are benefits that are really, really hard to assign a dollar value to. That doesn't mean we're not going to try. And it doesn't mean it doesn't become a part of the narrative, because it certainly does, but it's hard to get those benefits to fit into the neat little equation that sometimes our financial folks might like to see. Sustainability and resilience forces us to consider our favorite phrase, that'll never happen. Things that'll, listen, 2020 has proven anything can happen, all right? So let's get this idea of that'll never happen out of our head. It's gonna happen at some point, all right? So yes, it may be, the chances, you may think that it's low, but if it's still a possibility, we have to be prepared for that. However, the flip side of that is it's also true about the following. Sustainability professionals like myself, hopefully if we're good, we're gonna present solutions that have the best possible financial outlook for our organization, because we understand what our organization cares about. That also means that there is no one size fits all sustainability or resilience solution, right? Because organizations value things differently. And it's up to me to figure out what my organization values and develop the compelling argument from that angle. Another thing that's true is that sustainability professionals, we identify and communicate those externalities, those things that are really hard to measure, in such a way that our organization cares about them and it creates a positive value proposition. A specific example of this is that at IUPUI, we're a medical campus. That means that conversations around health weigh heavier on our campus because of what we do and what we stand for. So if there is a compelling argument about air quality, that's going to be more important for maybe an organization like ours than somebody else, and that's worth something to us. And then also, sustainability professionals, we recognize the value of thinking about and avoiding tomorrow's problems. And maybe not avoiding the problem, but avoiding the cost of tomorrow's problems. Like, let's anticipate it now. That's what we're here for. We're here to think about these things and to come up with creative solutions now. So let's dispel the myth that sustainability is expensive, right? It's true that some of these things are hard to measure, but in the long run, it's going to save us a lot of heartache. So just some specific examples that I'm going to run through from IUPUI real quick. And I've provided a few examples, 3 that are what I'm going to call price-led decisions, where the reason the decision was made is because it financially just made sense. But I'm also going to talk about the other benefits that tied to our values as an institution that made the argument even more compelling. And then I'm going to show you 2 value-led decisions where on paper, the thing isn't going to pay for itself. However, it was aligned with what our values are as an institution, and that was compelling enough to make the decision be made. So the first price-led decision that I want to lead with is we did some energy efficiency updates to our parking garages. Just kind of universally, in energy efficiency efforts are kind of a no-brainer, especially if you're that hard line making financial decisions. These things pay for themselves really quickly, and they also mitigate against future costs. So this was an example at IUPUI. This is just one example of energy efficiency efforts, just because it's a really compelling one. We have a ton that I could share with them, but this is just one. So we moved 3 of our parking garages from high pressure sodium lights, which are pretty they're high energy users, and they don't cast the best light, to bi-level LED lights that are on photocells and also on occupancy sensors. So they only kick on when there's not enough natural light on the garage, and then when they do kick on, they're on a low level, and as they pick up motion, they bounce to the highest level. So by switching 3 of our parking garages over to this sort of system, we reduced energy usage by 58%. You can still see the kilowatt hour reduction there. It was enough energy to power 92 homes in a year. And that was, all 3 of these were switched in 1 year, right? So this is 1 year's worth of savings, but then multiply that times forever, or until whenever the next best technology comes on the market. So by garage here, you can see how that energy reduction played out. Riverwalk Garage, 74% reduction, Sports Garage, 77, University Hospital, 53. That's because University Hospital actually does have some HVAC systems in there and a few more elevators because of just the way that space is utilized. So that was a great financial argument, right? 77% use reduction in 1 year for 1 garage, multiply that times forever. Woo, no brainer, right? Move forward with that one. But there are a lot of other ancillary benefits associated with this. Better lighting meant we had better light quality. It looked better. It also improved safety in that facility, and it mitigated us against future price increases on energy, right? We know that for big organizations, utility rates go up by a certain percentage almost every year, like clockwork. We know that. So by taking advantage of mitigating now, we're protecting ourselves against future rate hikes later. Another price-led decision was how we manage our exterior waste on campus. So we had just over 300 exterior waste bins, public waste bins, like ones you might see on a sidewalk in a city or in a parking lot somewhere. There are over 300 of them. Over here to the right is actually a map of where it shows where all of our exterior waste bins were, because they are now no longer. And they were all mismatched. They didn't look that great. We only had 4 of them that were paired with recycle bins. And the goal was to try to get, okay, well, how can we collect recycling to make sure we're diverting that waste from a sustainability perspective? And the issue was just the cost to replace the bins was going to be over $600,000. Ooh, nobody wants to swallow that bill. And then there was labor costs. Come to find out, there were 2 people spending about 2 hours a day, every day, going around to empty these bins, regardless of how full they were, because we didn't know, right? Sometimes you might have a big event and your bins are overflowing. Other times, maybe not as busy and the bin's hardly full at all, but somebody still went around to check it. So that was time, and that was also fuel for the vehicle, or charging time for the vehicle. So what we decided to do, Occam's razor solution, we just said, let's just get rid of them. Right? Let's avoid the costs entirely, and let's just get rid of them. So we went from over 300 exterior bins to now we have less than 20. And the 20 that we have are only in outdoor dining areas, or in one area of campus that's actually historical and we can't touch it. So now we avoided that $600,000 replacement cost. We also were able to redirect that labor to things that are more productive, but there are also a lot of other ancillary benefits too: improved aesthetics, reduce pest issues, reduce contamination in our waste, improve worker safety, because those things can get really heavy when you empty them. So again, a price-led decision, but also speaks to some of our other goals that we have as a campus. Another one was the electrification of our grounds fleet. So we are partnered with Greenworks, which is their commercial line. They brought their commercial line out to campus and let our grounds crew try all their equipment for 2 weeks for free. So risk-free opportunity to try out new equipment. Our grounds team really loved it, and they decided to procure their first round of commercial electric equipment for maintaining our grounds at IUPUI. So you can see the list of items that we now have on campus. So this was more of a price-led decision, but also had a lot of other great ancillary benefits. So the average refill price is kind of across the fleet. It's averaged about $12 a day in gasoline. Remember, we're a big campus. If it's during the growing season, we're using this equipment 8 hours a day, right? Multiple people using 8 hours a day. The average cost to charge these is 7 cents a day, right? So there's immediate price differentiation there. But then also there's the maintenance costs that in this case have been eliminated. No more oil, no more belts, no lubricants, no spark plugs, no air filters, no winterization of equipment. We don't have to do this anymore. The only sort of replacement that we have to do is the tires on the mower. If your battery ages out, you switch out the battery, bring in a new one. So the maintenance costs and labor are eliminated or at least greatly reduced. But there are also a lot of other benefits. Reduced noise, which now means that we can mow when classes are in session, right? Gives us more work time during the day. No fumes. That's really great because a lot of our research facilities have fresh air intake, and you don't necessarily want to smell the weed eater fumes as you're working in your lab. Improved worker safety and satisfaction. Because they're quieter, they don't have to wear hearing protection anymore because it's below OSHA standards. I didn't know this, but apparently when you use a blower all day during the fall, the vibration from the engine, you actually go home and your hand shakes at night. That's what some of our grounds crew told us. They don't get that anymore because there's not any vibration in the motor for this particular piece of equipment. So those are some price-led decisions, but also spoke to some of our other values. Now, what about value-led decisions? These are programs that on paper, they're going to cost you something no matter what. However, because they speak to the strategic plan or the values of our institution, we're able to make the argument that it's worth it, right? It's worth the investment. So one of those things is our sustainability internship program. We have 13 students. Each of them are focused on goals in our strategic plan. So they have very focused roles. The experience provides real world opportunity for them. Often, many of them are helping us march our goals towards their ultimate destination. They get professional development, they get research experience, and then ultimately at the end of the day, they land some of the best sustainability jobs in the state. On paper, this costs us money. However, it's worth it. Why? Because we're a university that's here for students. We're directly fulfilling some of the items in the strategic plan, and we're speaking to our values. So even though it costs something, it's been deemed a worthy investment of the campus. Another example of this is the campus kitchen at IUPUI. So this is a student-led organization that's administered by our office. They rescue food that would normally, like leftovers, that would normally end up being thrown away. Rescue that food, transform it into meals, and then serve it to those who are experiencing food insecurity. So you can see the numbers there of what our students have been able to do since Campus Kitchen was formed. If you're not aware, there was actually a big report done at IUPUI here in the last year that says that upwards of 40% of our students have experienced food insecurity. That's a problem if students aren't able or wondering where their next meal comes from. So this is a sustainable way for the university to meet that need of addressing student food insecurity that allows them to maybe decide to stay in college longer. So that affects our retention rate. If they're eating healthily, they're getting better grades, which means they're going to graduate on time. And we're going to get them out and hopefully incurring less debt during that time. So it directly addresses a need of the university, but also helps support some of the items in our strategic plan around retention and graduation rates. So I'll leave you with that. Like I said, that's just a highlight reel, some of a handful of examples that we have. We have plenty more that we can talk about. And if you have questions, would love to address those, but I think I'll pass it off to William. You're next, bud.
All right. So first of all, thank you to Janet and Andrea for inviting me to this webinar. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you, Jessica, for that very enlightening and clarifying presentation. And thank you to everybody else on this call who made the choice to tune into this important topic during their very busy days. So a little bit of opening before I share my screen. So I saw that I believe I'm co-host, so I should have the ability to share the screen in a moment here, but some useful background before I show you the tool that Janet alluded to. So the lab that I'm a part of is the Crisis Technologies Innovation Lab. And we really exist for the purpose of building bridges between technology and data to help crisis responders and communities prepare for the future. So that's really sort of the high level objective of the work that the lab partakes in. More recently, we've been focused on work that is centered around optimizing decision-making processes that lead to better community resilience long-term. So resilience, kind of like health, it's a concept that we all understand and generally agree on, but it sort of defies precise definition. But for the purpose of this talk, we'll think of resilience in terms of this capacity to thrive in suboptimal conditions, thriving in terms of economic health, infrastructure health, and things like that. So why we're here today is to really talk about a joint effort that we are collaborating on with the Economic Development Administration and the Indiana Business Research Center on this platform called APRED, which stands for the Analysis Platform for Risk, Resilience, and Expenditure in Disasters. So as part of this work, we've collaborated with several economic developers across the Midwest to identify barriers to making optimized decisions for improving community resilience. What we've found is that it's not necessarily for a lack of data or a lack of information. There's actually a lot of useful information out there. The real problem is that the data is often inaccessible. It lives in silos, and on top of that, there's thousands of silos. The data lives on desktops, different servers, and so it's very difficult to bring it all together. So as part of our work between now and June, we're hoping to address this problem in 3 valuable ways. So the first is to really solve this silo problem. So can we bring these discrete data living in different places together and show how they can come together to describe some relevant information like funding opportunities for communities, opportunities to improve resilience, natural disaster prevalence moving forward, and provide that into one cohesive operating picture for practitioners to use. The second thing that we like to do is to be able to predict outcomes. So how can we use the data to predict how funding does improve future resilience? So Jessica had mentioned in her presentation this idea of what is the cost of doing or not doing. And so we'd like to be able to illustrate that in no uncertain terms on the platform as well. And the third thing that we'd like to provide at the tail end of this project is a prescriptive function. And so what we mean by that is we'd like to be able to take the data, the models that we're putting together, and to be able to suggest what areas of investment make the most sense and are most likely to lead to long-term resilience. So that's a little bit of background. What I'd like to do now is share where we're at today with the platform, what it can currently do. And again, if there's time for questions or even after the call, I invite anybody to reach out to further discuss this platform, how it might be useful for you or the people that you work with. So let me see if I can get it to share. Okay, great. Is that showing?
Great.
Okay, awesome, thank you. Yep. So each part of the platform that we've built up to this point is really intended to answer specific questions that stakeholders have asked us. So by and large, one of the biggest questions we get asked is, where are my funding opportunities? So where are opportunities to invest in my community's future resilience? One of the things that we have realized is that it's not always obvious where the funding opportunities are. So this is our way of making that a little bit easier for communities to identify. So what we've done here, for example, is, so we'll use Sonoma County as an example. Hey. What happened? There we go. There we go. So apologies for the delay there. So what we were able to show here are a couple of important pieces of information. So we show a timeline of FEMA disaster declarations, but on top of that, we show EDA supplementals that the community could potentially qualify for. So this is a way of sort of providing a quick picture of what are the available funding opportunities to my community, and then what is the next step to get there. So you can click into the disaster supplemental details, and then you can quickly click to apply. So that is the first question that we were hoping to answer with this platform. The second question that we were wanting to answer at this point is, now that I have funding, or now that I know that I have funding opportunities, how is my community presenting? And what we really mean by that is, where are the gaps in my community that could benefit from investment to improve long-term resilience? So there's several things that we've put together in what's essentially a county profile that would be relevant to that type of inquiry. So I'll go basically from top to bottom here. So at the very top, you see descriptive statistics. Let me see if I can enlarge it. There we go. Some relevant descriptive statistics for your community. So you have things like population, age distribution, GDP, and median income. Very high level statistics related to Sonoma County. As we scroll lower, we show what's called a business vulnerability index. And so essentially this shows you what proportion of businesses in the community are susceptible or highly vulnerable to future disasters, whether natural or economic. Obviously, there's not a lot of change in these graphs, and so we're working to show some additional level of resolution to make this more usable moving forward. The second component is this idea of disaster resilience. So as you can see here, there are several different components here that feed into this notion of overall community resilience. So we show that at these different levels, and if you click, stakeholders are able to see precisely what these different measures mean in terms of how they're calculated, and you're able to compare how your county does relative to the state, relative to the US average. And it's important to note that none of these measures were created in a vacuum, but it's actually the byproduct of extensive research done by Susan Cutter at the University of South Carolina, really pulling together a lot of diverse research that's been done in this space. And she's essentially put together this blueprint, which is what we're showing here, is all of these measures coming together to demonstrate what overall community resilience looks like. And the last component is showing natural disaster prevalence. So really to address that question of what are some of the climate-related natural disaster incidences that are occurring in my community, and what potentially could be more prevalent moving forward. So this is the county level profile. And then if we go back, there's a couple other of views that we call macro views. So just potentially useful descriptive information that stakeholders might find valuable to explore in more detail. So we have a disaster resilience map. So you're able to pick these different categories of resilience and look at it at a macro level in terms of what communities are thriving and what are potentially not doing as well in the United States. We're also able to look at EDA supplemental awards to date. So you can get a sense of what communities have been awarded funds at this point, and then perhaps equally important, understanding what communities have not been funded or have not received funding yet. So again, this is the platform on a high level. And right now, this is really intended to describe the situation. So this is a descriptive platform, but what we'd like to do is bake in these prescriptive and predictive features that I alluded to. And again, if there's anybody on this call who would like to take a deeper dive or potentially provide input on how this could benefit you moving forward, we'd certainly invite you to reach out so we can have that discussion. So thank you so much, again, everybody, for your time. And I think it's back to Janet now.
All right. Thanks so much to both of you. Very informative and inspiring. So you can put your questions in the chat room. That's one way to do it. I think we can also just have people unmute themselves and ask a question. And if that gets unruly, we'll put a stop to that. William, you got done so fast that I didn't have time to formulate a question to start the bidding with. So does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask either William or Jessica?
Well, I'll ask one. Can you hear me?
Yes, thanks, Terry.
Hi, this is sort of a random question. I haven't really formulated it, and it may be more for Jessica, but I'm not sure, it may not apply to William as well. And I'm thinking, Jessica, as you talked about values, And I'm thinking just the last few weeks, particularly, thinking about equity and an equity lens for this kind of work. So I'm curious what thinking's been done from your own work, or the work you're describing here at IUPUI or else IUB or elsewhere, on the notion of an equity lens, especially as it may help us think, look at gaps, as we think about, someone talked about gaps. Well, you talk about gaps based on what? So that's my question, just that kind of thing. It's a random question.
Yeah, so the campus kitchen, I think, is a great embodiment of that, of addressing equity issues. You know, addressing this issue of student food insecurity to try to give most students as possible a fighting chance to be able to complete their courses on time, stay active in their academic pursuits. So in sustainability, there's always this social lens through which we're able to analyze things through. And even in having discussions on campus around things like recycling, we often bring up the question of like, well, do you know where your waste goes? At least in Indianapolis, oftentimes it will go close to a community that is already experiencing hardship, right? So when you think about where your landfills and where your incinerators are, they're not in the nice affluent neighborhoods, right? They're in the ones that are predominantly minority and have socioeconomic barriers. So as an institution, is that okay for us to make our waste impact somebody else's quality of life, right? For it to go to them. So oftentimes these things are a part of the conversation, but they're not necessarily explicitly. This is one of those externalities that are hard to add to the financial model, but they're certainly a part of the discussions when we have them.
So could I ask a follow-up question? I will be quiet.
Sure.
When
Yeah.
you talked about values, I think you talked price, cost, values, I mean, along the element. So, but in your work,
Mm-hmm.
is equity a fundamental part of the analysis that's done?
Yes,
How does
through
that
that.
work for you?
Yes.
Here's how it works. I know the big picture stuff. Yeah, I'm sure we all agree. I'm curious how does it work in practice for doing resiliency analysis and planning from an equity perspective?
So this may be a little bit answered differently for cities than for universities,
Sure,
because to some extent we're a bit homogenous, as in we're all working on the same thing together at the same time. But regardless of that, usually our questions around equity are on how what we do impacts those around us. So what our institutional impact is. Versus I would see how from a city perspective, it would be, well, who's going to be the most vulnerable and how do we solve this problem for them as a governing body? That's a little bit outside of our scope just because of who we are, like our organizational limits.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
So Jeff had a question to William, which is that you showed a California example. Do you have these data for counties in Indiana? What would that look like?
Oh yeah. So that was just an example for illustration. But yes, we can pull up counties in Indiana. So if it'd be helpful, I can show that right now, or
Jeff. Why don't you do that? We have a few minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Oops, sorry. Accidentally clicked a county. Apologize, it's running a little bit slowly today, but normally it's fairly quick. Okay, so let me go back here. So, how
about Hendricks County? Can you pull up Hendricks County?
Yeah. Okay, so I'm not sure if there's a specific thing that would be useful to call attention to, but again, similar to the profile I showed earlier, it's the same information, but again, contextualized for Hendricks County. So we'll show the same descriptive statistics here.
It shows that there's a disaster declaration related to the pandemic.
Yes, yes.
Essentially, except for Hendricks County.
That's correct. And again, the goal of having this sort of be among the first pieces of information that you see is it's really intended just make it obvious what are the immediate opportunities right now. for my community or for my county in terms of being able to apply for funds. In the context of, again, you mentioned an opportunity related to the pandemic. The good news is that the latest opportunity for funding from the EDA applies, I believe, to all counties. So everybody is uniformly eligible, which is good.
And William, I think you've told me in the past that the reason why this is important is because right now when cities and counties are trying to apply for certain types of grants, they need to list what past declarations they've received, and there's no good way for them to find that out unless they've been tracking it on their own. So this will be a nice database for where people can access that information. Do I remember that correctly?
Yes, yeah, and it's part of this overarching goal of just making this process less time intensive. So how can we bring all the information for you in one place? How can we alleviate the need to have one more phone call exchange or another email chain, and just make that a simpler process for communities looking to apply for funding?
And when will people be able to have access to this database so that they can take this information to their local leaders or others?
So if we're talking strictly with respect to just these like descriptive data, so maybe what you see in this profile, we are working with the EDA and the rest of our team to get it looked through by a legal team to make sure the language is compliant and appropriate. So we are hoping by the end of June. And if it works, what we can do is we can work with ERI to send that in the form of a newsletter or an announcement so that everybody on this call will know the moment that it's available.
But it's very near term.
Yes.
So
The things that would be longer term would be those predictive and prescriptive components. Those things would not be available till much later.
okay, great. And Ben asks, William, how does the database stay up to date?
That's a good question. So one of our partners is the Indiana Business Research Center. So they are sort of the core team that maintains keeping all these data up to date. So the rule of thumb for this project is to automate as much as possible. So I think essentially every data point that feeds into this is automatically scheduled to be collected from their respective data sources and then reflected on the platform. So I don't know if that answers the question, if there's anything else I can clarify on there.
Great. So while other people are thinking of questions, I'll tell you guys one thing I was thinking about when Jessica was going through her discussion, which is, wow, this would make a really great workshop for people to do the exercise of identifying their institution's values and figuring out where those are embodied, and then picking an activity, recycling bins or whatever, and going through the analysis. And with people actually sitting with a computer or paper and pencil working through this from the perspective of their own organization. So I'm very good at thinking up things for other people to do. But I wonder if people think that would be a useful thing. Might you throw something in the chat box and tell us that that's something that you would find useful and participate in?
Yeah, because it's like I said in the presentation, there is no one size fits all solution. It's so customized and tailored. So I can sit up here and talk about our 3 price-led solutions, but they may not be price-led solutions for you because your pricing is different. So it's it would be really good to march through that with folks.
And on that topic, we had a question from Kyle that says, businesses seem to use a shorter time frame for ROI. 10 years, as IUPUI uses, would be rare in the private sector. So how can you make a financial case for ROI for a company that is looking at 2 years?
So my initial response to that is actually a lot of your biggest, most impactful, most savings projects in sustainability and resilience are going to have a longer term ROI than 2 years. So I guess you might be stuck with small potatoes, sustainability and resilience projects, versus if you're looking to save $20 million over 10 years, you're going to need a longer ROI frame than that. And you're going to be actually missing out on some really, really big savings opportunities by having such a narrow window. So not to say you couldn't still hold firm to that 2-year ROI, but I still think that it's good for hopefully somebody in this space to say, hey, I know we have a 2-year ROI, but you know, if we look at 5, we can actually save $20 million. Maybe that's worth talking about.
And Jessica, one thing you said to me the other day was that, well, you know, IUPUI has been around for 200 years and we're just looking at a 10-year return on investment. So it seems like there is an argument for a longer term. And that's certainly true of all the local governments too. I mean, these local governments have been around for a long time. So why are we only looking at such a short period for ROI?
I think especially for public institutions, it might be a bit easier to make that argument. Like, let's extend our window. But hopefully you want your business to be around more than 2 years. So.
Well, but it's also, I realize that in business that there may not be the flexibility to bring in things that may seem intangible. But of course, when Jessica was talking about externalities, those are not in fact intangible. Those are actual costs that actual entities are bearing. We just traditionally have not included them in our cost benefit analysis. And I think that that's an argument that accountants may or may not appreciate, economists certainly appreciate, and one would hope that responsible corporate leaders would be increasingly willing to consider.
So I have a question. Is that all right? It's for Jessica. So it's interesting because I think there's an underlying theme here, which is it feels like almost a human tendency.
Hi, Al. This is Jeff Averly. I'll be in.
All good. A human tendency to think about ROI in the very immediate term, right? Because ROI and investment, the way you think about it is largely contingent on the space of time that's under consideration, right? So my question is, how can an organization, private or public, be more intentional about thinking more longer term? Simply because it is a tendency to think about ROI in terms of next year. Like my favorite phrase that you said during your presentation was multiply that times forever. Because there's a fundamental truth here, which is if you're optimizing something, the effects are cumulative indefinitely over, again, the span of however long your organization is there. So I don't know, what are your thoughts on that? What are the ways an organization who's not thinking this way can be intentional about thinking this way?
So I think some of it goes back to that value proposition, like speaking to an organization's values, because there have been decisions that the university have made that have been beyond that 10-year ROI window, but it just took a heck of a lot more convincing. And some of that was around proof of concept, right? If we do this now, we know it's more expensive now, but let's do it on a small scale now so that speaking specifically about renewable energy, so that when that time or when that price does come down to a price point that is within that window that we're comfortable with, we have had X numbers of years of knowing how to optimize them, how to maintain them, how to take care of them, so we know we can get our best return out of that particular investment. So there have been examples of where that 10-year has been busted. But it definitely took a lot more finagling and more convincing. So I don't know if that answers. I don't even really know if I know how to answer your question, honestly. but that's an example of how that can happen. But I think a lot of it just takes really honest, transparent conversations with people. Like that's what I found is like having these hard conversations about asking the question, why do we have a tier ROI? What was the point of that? Like, what was the values that informed that decision? What was the philosophy that informed that decision? And can we revisit it? And if we can't, why not? I think having these and they might be a little bit painful, but I think now's the time for us to ask these uncomfortable questions around why we make the decisions that we make. And I know in cities, sometimes it's based on election cycles. Well, if I've been a resident of Indianapolis since I've been born, right? I don't care about a 4-year cycle, right? I care about my lifetime's worth of my cycle. So also take the position of the people that you serve, your customers, your citizens, your students. What are they going to expect out of you? that matters too.
So we're right at 1 o'clock, and I know a lot of people have to hop there, including myself. There was one more question for Jessica about whether it takes more effort to convince decision makers when you make arguments for value-led decisions. Andrea, can we leave the line open for another minute or so for Jessica to answer that? And I'm going to exit and thank everybody, William and Jessica, for a great discussion, and I'll see you guys all next month.
Thanks, Janet.
Thank you.
Yeah, to answer that question, the answer is it depends, because it depends on how compellingly it speaks to the values of your institution. If you have data in front of you, like we do around food insecurity, all right, that's a really known problem. That's a big deal. Maybe it doesn't take as much effort to convince somebody that it's worth investing in that. I do think it is important that for those more value-led decisions, you make very explicit connections between what you are suggesting and what the institution wants to accomplish. If you just come to people with a feel-good project, we're just going to do it because it feels good, that's probably not going to go much of anywhere unless you just happen to fall on sympathetic ears. But if you say, hey, not only does this project make us feel good, but it also does all these other things around fulfilling our mission as an organization or fulfilling our business plan or our goals, the effort, I guess the effort would then be more on our part to develop a compelling argument. But like in conversation, it doesn't take as much effort to convince someone if you've done your homework.
Well, thanks, Jessica. Those are certainly motivating words for us to try to argue for all the efforts we wanted to get done, but maybe don't have the budget to do immediately. So thanks to you for your wise words, and thanks to William for sharing your tool and all of your wise efforts happening at the Luddy School. So we are going to sign off now, but thanks to all of our attendees, and look for an email from me with more information in the coming days. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Simply brilliant. Take care.